I can do that.
And we are live here on Plus One EXP's Roll for Content channel. My name is Tony Vicenda. I'm Chief Alchemist here at Plus One EXP, which is a weird little brand that multi-classes in tabletop game design, beard, and skincare alchemy in the Bardic College of Content Creation.
Gets me every time.
The hope and desire here at Plus One EXP is to help amazing designers find great players who love their games, and amazing players find great designers whose games they can love. We do that in a lot of different ways, but we have never done it in this way or with this person before. We have never done a prep session on stream. It's you. I'm not like anti-prep. Whenever somebody's like, how much do you prep? I'm like, do you mean how much time do I spend thinking about games between games? A ton. How much time do I sit down and spend writing things out? Maybe 15 minutes.
Sure.
And so I am very excited to learn at the feet of the master, Kyle Latino. Kyle, why don't you tell people who you are, what you do, and a little bit about Monstrous.
Sure. Yes, you might recognize my voice from and these beautiful hands of mine from the YouTube channel MapCrow, and which is the name of the channel, not me. My name is Kyle. Say it at the beginning of every episode. Everyone still just calls me MapCrow, and I just need to live with it. So I have been talking about art and drawing maps and game design on the internet for a couple of years now, and we are getting ready to launch a Kickstarter for our first like really big book. And when I say we, I mean my friends at Cloud Curio, of which I am a member. It's going to be a big, beautiful hardback book that is going to collect a lot of the art and thoughts that have been in the Building Better Monsters series on MapCrow, but also it actually like includes designs and writing and systems that are system agnostic tools that are going to help you reliably kind of reproduce monsters of a specific player, of a specific type, so you can tell specific stories with specific monsters. That's the idea. Different monsters should tell different stories, and that is what we are trying to offer you the opportunity to do with Monstrous.
I love it. I am excited about it. One, I'm a huge fan of your work. Not just, I mean, I first became aware when I think a lot of people did of the work that you were doing when you were doing the Old Roads during Zine Quest 2 or 3? 3?
It was 3, I think.
3.
Yeah.
Then you and I have interacted a lot. We had you work on Repugnant. We've talked about some other projects. I'm a huge fan of Splatbook, but I love the way that Old Roads has grown into MapCrow, and specifically the Building a Better Monster series that you do on there, along with a lot of other great things, which I know it was part of the big development process for this. So, you gave us the elevator pitch of what it is, and most of our session is going to focus on just doing the prep. We actually are going to prep for a session we are going to play this Friday using the Monstrous resource and using our House OSR system. Down we go. But tell me about the genesis. Like, why did you want to make this book? Why is this Cloud Curio's kind of first big book, and why does it matter to you?
Do I tell you the real story, or do I tell you like the trumped up like BS, the marketing BS?
You can tell us both if you want to.
I think I'll go out on a limb a little bit and say that the quality of the community that you have helped to grow is at a high enough caliber that I can trust you with the straight dope here. And that is like, once upon a time I put out a video called "The Problem with Goblins," And it was a lightning rod for a lot of like negativity and just like really, really nasty stuff in the comment section, right? And at that point, I realized that if I wanted to offer people a different way to think about games and think about monsters in their games and the stories that they're telling with these monsters, that going around and policing each individual person and each individual monster and saying, no, don't do it this way, it's bad for everyone. Like there are forums that can have that kind of criticism, but blast communication on the internet through YouTube, it wasn't good, and I wasn't happy with the results. I wasn't happy with the way that I put the language in those, and it was me really kind of like trying to do a good thing in a really unwise way. And what I realized, the conversation I really wanted to have was, here are some different things to try. Instead of don't use these things, I wanted to then like build a platform on including new ways to think about things or new ways to look at old myths. And that really kind of like turned into Building Better Monsters and Monstrous, which I really wanted to do because, I mean, selfishly, I wanted to have a hardback book, like an art book with this. I have like, you know, like I have like all these paintings. The only art that I have hanging in my house is my stuff because I made it because I like to look at it. But I also got the feeling like that really like people are stuck in this area where they're constantly being told that you can tell whatever story you want to with all these different, you know, exciting epic fantasy RPGs. But then they're not really given the tools to make different decisions. They're given a lot of combat stats. They're not really given a lot of language that talks very directly about stories and world building, unless it's part of like a big, you know, corporate setting or something like that. So yes, this is me and Kenny and Sally and Amber all getting together to try to say like, hey, here are some new things to add to your charcuterie board of fantasy weirdos nonsense to offer out to the people you care about around your table. That's really what it is.
I love it. Can you give us the Delicious in Dungeons stats on the charcuterie board of the monsters we'll be sampling tonight? Is the real question. No, I love it. I'm excited. There's a million things I want to talk to you about, but we can do that another time. We're here specifically to do the prep. So let's kind of let's just dive into it. Chat, if you're out there watching, if you have a favorite monster, if you saw that video and you're still mad at Kyle and want to leave something nasty in the chat.
Yeah, I took it down, so don't bother looking for it.
Go somewhere else. Go somewhere else if you want to leave something nasty in the chat. But if you have a favorite monster, if you are curious about the book, if something comes up, drop questions in the chat. Let us know where you're watching from, wherever you're watching. Even if you're watching later over on YouTube, we would love to hear from you. But we're gonna dive into prepping for this. So Kyle, whenever you are ready.
Yeah, let's go on over to the preppy thing. We discussed several ways to handle this transition, and that wasn't one of them. That's just what came out.
That's great though. It did what it needed to do. As soon as you hit the button, I'll hit the button.
Here it is.
That was smooth. It was smooth.
It can't get smoother than that.
God. Is this 18-year-old broadcasting? Because that was smooth. And so, all right.
So let's just kind of go over quickly, like just what we're looking at. In Monstrous, we're going to have 10 different types of monsters that are provided, and we're calling those categories of monsters cores. So each of these cores, in this case, we're going to be looking at mobs today, and mobs would be like your kobolds and your goblins and just like your gaggle of weird little guys that are messing with villagers at lower levels and that kind of stuff. So we kind of have like an intro to how that's going to go, talking about like what is the essential narrative essence from it, what are they trying to accomplish in the world, and how are they threatening your characters, and how are they threatening your NPCs, all that good stuff. And then we will have this worksheet for each one of these different cores with these kind of blank spaces. Now, these blank spaces aren't going to be large enough for you to write in them necessarily. It's just kind of say, like, as you're keeping notes, these are where we're expecting you to fill in your own ideas. And because we also know nobody's writing in books. Nobody's paying $75 for like the gold foil cover embossed edition, and they're gonna like, yeah, I'm gonna bust out my Sharpie and just watch the acidic ink eat away at these glossy pages. Like, we know that you're not gonna do that.
That's what PDFs are for, everybody.
That's what PDFs are for. That's right. So yeah, we have kind of like this Mad Libs, and we'll have examples for how we're filling that out. And then for each of the 10 cores, we will also have 3 different what we're calling forms, which is versions of those monsters that we have filled out in our way to try to demonstrate, you know, like, here is our take on like a couple of different dragons or a couple of different liches, or like, you know, this is our version of the mimic, just to show you how many things, by rearranging the details and integrating these monsters into the world with our system here, how much more flavor you can get out of these monsters. You will also probably notice there are no stat blocks, there are no combat abilities. Our assumption is whatever game you love to run probably already has all the stats and combat abilities that you need. So we're just focusing on all that fluff, all that flavor, all that juice, you know?
Love it. Chaocalypse is in the chat also too, who is one of my favorite adventure designers, is very excited to see you on here, very excited about Monstrous also too. So really excited to have you here with us. And Mark Major says that their favorite monster is the 1E, and I can't even pronounce it, OTYUGH. And they said they love
the Otyog.
The Otyog, a garbage slimer, and they have no idea how to pronounce it either. Kyle just did it though.
I mean, I took a stab. I mean, it's not like Dave Arneson's going to come high five me if I say the right thing.
You were braver than any of us, though. And that's what's really the most important thing, is that you took a stab at it, whereas we were cowards. And so, I mean, Mark couldn't pronounce it in their defense, but you know, I could have tried. And so, all right.
So yeah, the plan here today is to go through and come up with a completely original monster that we will then build our prep around to run a one-shot on Friday that I will be GMing. And just like a couple of notes on prep and how I like to do it. I think of myself as a prep light guy, but also like I tend to spend like at least an hour to 2 hours. And so depending on where you're coming from, that might be like very prep full. So I guess everything's relative. But I really like to base my method on Sly Flourish's Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master by Mike Shea. It's astonishingly useful for prepping almost any kind of RPG I've ever run, and specifically the secrets and clues aspect, where you're just kind of like coming up with facts about your game that could come up if you know. So you're just kind of coming up with almost like cool trivia bits or little mysterious things that people could discover about your monster, about your adventure, about your NPCs and their connections, and all that kind of stuff. And that has heavily influenced the way that we have designed Monstrous to almost like act like a secrets and clues note-taking device, but specifically for the monsters that you're coming up with. So that's just like the general primer where my attitude is for prep versus like somebody who's like going to be like, you know, to make an apple pie, you must first invent the universe. We're not going quite that far. We're just not.
No universes for you.
No universes for you. We're assuming the foundation of the universe. So I'm going to zoom in here so we can take a look. And Adobe was nice enough to update Acrobat right like today, so I don't know how to use it. Like they moved everything around to the different sides of the screen for me, so that's really exciting. We all get to learn the new. Sorry for dating the broadcast, but
Adobe will probably release another one also too.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
I love the double layer of you're going to be moving things around, and I'm going to try to make sure it's showcasing through perfectly also too. That's going to be a double.
Good. So I'm really throwing a monkey wrench into
you're
things.
Great.
That's wonderful. So yeah, I just want to start off because Kenny has done some truly amazing writing with this, and always, again, we were talking a little bit at the show, and I don't mind blowing up Kenny's spot because I'm a bad friend. But Kenny is a huge fan of Magic the Gathering and Magic the Gathering cards. So like almost all of his naming conventions for things sound like a Magic card title, and he always wants to write in like in-world flavor text for things, and I enjoy I enjoy giving him my opinions about the poetry he wrote. So it all works out really well. So Kenny starts off our mob's core, like our introduction, with this little poem. Pound the drums, sound the horns, snuff their lights, and burn their corns. Follow the leader wherever they goes. Who's the leader? Nobody knows. This is a Stiltlands nursery rhyme. So this kind of gives you, already we get the idea of that mobs are going to be these little spooky boogeymen that are kind of pervading the deep country of the world in sort of our assumption for a lot of our monster designs is kind of like kind of a dark fantasy, sort of like folkloric, mythological bent to things. But we also offer lots of examples on how to use this exact same process to make a like a sci-fi monster. Like if you wanted to do a cyber dragon, we have some examples of how to do that kind of stuff. You want to do like a far future lich, we offer that too. But a lot of the flavor text and a lot of the monsters that we actually have drawings and art for are all going to be the things that I like to draw because I'm drawing them. So if we move on over, that's the great thing about being a creative director is it is another word for bully, and I'm thriving. I will have when somebody else is driving the boat, I'll have difficulty surrendering my power I've grown mad with. So let's talk about the mob's essence. And again, I'm just going to read some of Kenny's wonderful writing here. The mob's essence, scarcity, pain, darkness, death, chaos. These are the things of nightmares. And when folks are stricken with primal fear, that fear can take shape as a mob of magically conjured creatures. They are born of fear. They embody it. They amplify it. But they are not an ancestry or a culture. They are pieces of old gods, or lumps of angry dirt, or shambling amalgams of broken gears. When they appear, they are the dread. They personify, they multiply and spread. So our idea here is that, I really can't put it any clearer than that, but we try whenever, if you want to do goblins as like a really interesting and distinct culture that tie into like the deep history of adjacent creatures as more of like one of those really out there Doctor Who villains that's just like living fear personified, that kind of coagulate around problems that are happening in the community. That's kind of our take on this.
Love it.
Was that a question, Tony?
No, so we love it. We do have some great monster shout outs in the chat.
Heck yeah, please do. I'm here in Streamerland, so
yeah.
I'm unfortunately don't have chat open, so please let me know.
You should not. You should focus on what you're doing. Chaocalypse Benyu says, I think manticores are described by monsters and most where they're essentially mistreated hounds, fat on malice, which are transformed purely due to hatred. Wolfmir says Kyle is one of my favorite monsters for sure. I responded to that with ultimate self-insert stretch goal. Kyle is the monster now, so maybe we get that 11th monster, and it's just the map crow.
I love it. I love it.
And then the Centaurpede from your video on handmade sketchbooks is also one of Cacalypse's favorites.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And honestly, here, I wonder if I have it around the 1 second. Let me show you the sketchbook that I have been keeping for Monstrous.
Love it. And if you're just joining us, again, drop your favorite monster in the chat. We're prepping for a session of Down We Go. We're going to be playing this Friday based on the Monstrous prep we're doing right now, which is the new upcoming system agnostic bestiary concept that Kyle and the Cloud Courier team are working on. Link is pinned at the top of the chat or in the video description.
The sketchbook, there's a video on the YouTube channel called The Perfect Sketchbook, and it talks about just like basically taking all those perfect, beautiful sketchbooks you bought and never use and cutting them up and stapling them together into like a grubby little crappy sketchbook that you will actually use. So this is the sketchbook that I have stapled together mostly for Monstrous. And you can see like whenever I'm drawing on like loose leaf paper, I just staple it in. So we get like all kinds of like, weird like fold out drawings of different pages and everything. And this just makes me so happy to just like hold and fiddle around with and like rediscover and restate. And it's like some of these are like big, like, fold out drawings and things like that. And it makes me feel like a creative person instead of like an organized person who is just like, I'm keeping these kinds of sketches in this book and these kinds of notes in this notebook, and never between shall they meet. It's like, you get messy, get crappy with it. That's my advice.
It does remind me of an idea I had the other day that I want to work with you on. I'm going to mute myself and just tell you. The audience won't be able to hear me, though.
Ooh, this is good. Ooh, the dream. I love it.
All right, so y'all will maybe find out about that one day or not, but
who knows for sure. I love that idea. Like, yeah, let's continue talking about that at a later time, because that's exactly my kind of scene. That's right. We're allegedly doing a thing about a thing in specific instead of just like me turning around to just grabbing whatever happens to be within reach and talking about that.
I'm glad you got on 30 minutes early, so we at least got a little bit out of our system, but I doubt it was enough.
The mob's goals. The idea here is that we want to set up every different type of monster with something to do, something to accomplish, so that it is not dependent on adventurers taking the bait for these monsters to matter to the world. And it'll give you some ideas where just like if they get lost in their own little side quests or whatever, what the monsters are doing behind the scenes or in between sessions, all that kind of stuff. So the mob's goal, though it seems paradoxical, the goals of any individual member of the mob is so simple: do what the rest of the mob does. And generally, that means growing and spreading and causing panic at every turn. Some seek to cultivate and harness this mayhem for some wicked end. Mob think renders the mob vulnerable to outside influences. So a mob working towards a defined goal is almost certainly being manipulated by some external force. So if you really wanted the big bad guy to be, like the old groundskeeper who's trying to like chase people away from this choice people of property, if you still want to pull off the rubber mask at the end of this, you can. If you still want to have like some upstart dark lord like running all of these weird little guys around the countryside, you can still do that. because that's any kind of symbol that we strongly associate with these creature types from pop culture that we kind of like, we have like a loose canon of texts that we look at and kind of compare with tones that we're looking for. We kind of we want to make sure that each category is flexible enough to include all of that good stuff. So the mobs in your story. The story of the mob is a process of growing completely out of control. At first, only a few impish weirdos might be seen running about and cackling in the dark, but soon they are multiplying, gathering supplies for some freakish project, and it won't be long before the town is overrun. All while the terror looms, feeding the mob. To combat them, the heroes will have to quell the fear that gave rise to them in the first place. So again, it's not enough just to walk into the dark forest and burn it down and get rid of all these weird little guys. Your real thing is like pointing you back at the rest of the setting, the rest of the NPCs, and the kind of relationships and stories that they have. Solving those problems is actually a better way of fighting these monsters than going up and rolling initiative. At least that's what we're suggesting. I'm not going to be at your table telling you what to do. Far be it from me.
Unless you pledge at...
No, I see what you're doing.
The macro attacks level.
I did that last time for Old Roads, and it was actually pretty fun. But I was really, really nervous about it. But I met some really, really cool folks that way, and I'm very nervous about playing with people I haven't met. But almost every time I do it, I have a lovely time. Yeah. So I'm just a coward, really. Mobs and your world. Mobs can arise from anywhere with intense visceral fear that takes hold of mortal folk. Farmers in the grip of a long drought, explorers trapped in an ice floe with dwindling rations, a city terrorized by a masked killer. When these fears of the community are at a fever pitch, the death spell of the world resonates and the mob congeals in the lightless places. Oh, Kenny. Like, I know I approved this writing, but I'm like, oh man. The death spell of the world resonates and the mob congeals in lightless places.
So good.
Oh, Kenny, my boy.
Look, why write text when you can write flavor text? You know what I'm saying?
That's right. It's like they should call regular text dry text, so that you're making a distinction.
This is
it's
wet
like you
text.
You have to decide. It's like this is not a neutral choice. You are choosing to write dry text or flavor text. So let's move on, and I've stalled for time enough. I'm gonna have to start making some creative decisions instead of patting myself on the back for working with somebody who writes better than me. So let's kind of get to this. So we have our first heading right here. Fear begets fear. The progenitor of the mob was created out of mortal folks' fear of blank, forever marking the mob with blank. And some of our examples here would be was created out of mortal folks' fear of city fires, forever marking the mob with smoldering hooves. I like that. I like that a lot. I wish I could just use that, but I feel like that would be not so great. I'm wondering. So fear of what? Fear of what? I'm wondering if we could do, now I'm thinking of like some current events right now. I don't want to get too specific in case there's a tragic turn to it or something like that. But there's a large group of people that are currently stranded right now. And that kind of gets, and also like back there, like stuck in an ice floe or like snowed in or something like that. I really like that.
Fear of isolation or separation for a mob is also a really interesting operational like, because a mob by its nature is together, but if it's a mob that is marked by fear of isolation, there's going to end up with something really interesting at the table when that comes to its final state.
I like that. And it kind of like, I mean, that's essentially what the movie The Thing is, right? Like it leads to a fear of like paranoia, right? Like that somebody in the group can't be trusted. So it might like lead to bizarre doppelgangers or that kind of thing. So I like the idea that maybe this is a story where we could just say like, you begin in a caravan that is crossing this mountain path, and an unseasonal storm has kind of like stranded you at the mountaintop. And so all of these weird things start happening. So
this is really just me getting all the GM's notes so I can speed run on Friday. That's my real goal here.
That's what's going on. So I'm just gonna start jotting down this this idea. So like, snowed in on mountaintop, and fear of isolation, paranoia. Yeah, I think that's really good, because it might be a situation where, in a world with monsters, and maybe there's like rumors surrounding some kind of like group, or maybe there's like a priest who won't say who he worships or something like that, that kind of like naturally becomes like a focal point of this paranoia. I like that. So the group leader, and we'll say caravan leader. That's caravan leader. And priest are suspected of luring group to die in the mountains.
Chaocalypse in chat says, goblins in my campaign were created out of their fear of losing their identity, and they appear as clay progeny, malleable and in pain.
Ooh, that's good. That's really solid. I mean, it's just like, it's definitely like kind of like dimmer than how they're kind of like, especially like the Pathfinder goblins, which are kind of just like almost like these horrific Funko Pop dolls brought to life, right? But I like a good like creepy goblin, like the idea, and we have our own take on goblins that I won't spoil here, but Kenny and I went back and forth on that one a lot to try to get something that feels very goblin-y, but also is based on like a specific community fear. So the progenitor of the mobs was created out of mortal folks' fear of being stranded, and forever marking the mob with so what physical feature would they have as a result of this? Forever marking them with let's just say like an eerie coldness, like almost like when ghosts enter a room, how like you immediately start like you see your breath or something like that. Like it's just like if one of these things is getting close, like that cold seems to bite your bones just like a little bit more harshly, a little bit more aggressively. Might come up with a different idea for that later, but it's we're streaming, so let's move on.
And also, yeah, you are also bound to literally none of this 100% by the time Friday rolls around, because any good GM is going to go somewhere between idea time. I just don't want anybody who's a +1 purist to be like, actually, Kyle, on Sunday you said this was going to be what happens, and so besides me, that's my job.
Yeah. I'll be looking for it. No, I want to try to keep it as close as I can, but I don't want to make people watch me just like, let's put on our thinking caps now. So to grow in ranks, the mob needs to spread its. I have a better idea. Instead of eerie coldness, I'll keep that, but we'll say extra long fingers. Right, so they have like these really long fingers that they're using to like plant evidence on people and kind of like snatch things when people aren't looking and stuff like that. I like that idea. So to grow in ranks, the mob needs to spread fear. We'll say, to the fear it spreads is paranoia. And I think that could be really interesting because we could have like sort of like our different combat types. So like maybe our caravan leader is like a ranger, and there's like a whole like adventuring party that's kind of like in charge of this caravan, or like, you know, I was an adventurer like you until I took an arrow to the knee kind of guy. So it's like already somebody that seems like he could cause problems if you like out and out accused him of something. We will see. The more fear spreads, the bigger, well, moving on to mob think now, the more fear spreads, the bigger the mob grows. And the bigger the mob grows, the more dangerous and out of control it becomes. By default, the mob has one of the following strengths and one of the following weaknesses. When the size of the mob grows beyond control of the common folks, it gains an additional strength and additional weakness. All right. The mob can travel great distances, communicate without speaking, survive unbearable conditions. That one seems pretty obvious. Complex contraptions, sneaky and stealthy, accurate. We'll just say I like extra sneaky. That'll be good. That'll be good to play around with all kinds of like, you know, to remind me, there's some kind of like notice check, or there's like some kind of perception check.
So we don't there it's like any other OSR, it's like interrogate the fiction. If something's hidden, it could be like, but certainly you could just be like, this is a hidden monster, and you could use their difficulty number as like a as like the number you have to get above on whatever type of check makes sense, right? Because depending on the type of monster, you should pick the stat that makes the most sense, and maybe even depending on the way the player is embodying their character. And that's not to say that anything could be, but like I would say like you could be using a mystical check, which is like will and intellect, to be like, are you tracking footprints in the snow, right? Could be
Gotcha.
Could be that, like you're looking for a pattern, versus a sneaky person might just be like, you know how other people try to get the drop on you, roll sneaky to see if there's somebody else around who is trying to do that to you, right? So saves usually come more so in the stance of, or perhaps there's more interrogating the fiction, and then saves are like, there's saves, which again could be anything, any of the rolls can be used to save also too, depending on what type of attack it is. So if they're throwing a dagger at you, you know, it's going to be sneaky, most likely to dodge out of the way. But if they are slowly freezing you to death, like it might be bloodthirsty to keep your vigor up, right? So
okay, that's good to know, because otherwise I was just going to plague them with a bunch of like BS perception checks.
Yeah,
and it's merciful that I don't.
Yeah.
What I'm going to pick for our weakness, that the mob is quick to panic. So they'll be if you get close to discovering one, they're out of there. So they're very sneaky, they're very stealthy, but if they feel like they are, you know, they will like knock over stuff and make a big like noise on the way out or something like that, kind of like a big commotion. That'll be pretty interesting. Okay, extra quick to panic and retreat.
Captain Sibs, I really like the idea of their extra long fingers extending from the darkness sneakily.
Yeah, and that'll be cool because, like, you know, it could be one of the clues could be, and I'll actually write this down. Long fingers, prints in the snow. Right. So automatically, like you kind of like get the sense that like something is, and you can slowly over the course of the adventure see more and more of these fingerprints kind of like clustered together in ways. Ooh, that's crazy. I love it. I love it. Okay, so moving on. Fear mongering. A craven bully blank is benefiting from the fear and chaos that surrounds the mob. So yeah, what kind of person in the group would I mean, I'll just first answers just right off the top of my head is a bandit scout is planted in the group and brings his distrust with him. So maybe it was somebody who was planning to strand them in the mountains so the bandits could do the thing, just steal everything in there. But this snowstorm has actually caused that to go awry. So
Yeah.
this is not. But that person is already thinking of this. What if somebody else had the idea? And that fear being whipped up immediately is already going to foment all this paranoia to begin with. I like that. We can probably, what I'll do right now, I'm thinking like we'll have like a couple of different probably like a cave system. They seek shelter in a cave. Caravan seeks shelter in a cave. So we don't just have this all happening like in sight of everyone all at once.
Well,
that would be great. Like we need some twisty, shadowy corners and like other locations to explore.
Yeah, depending on how heavy the snow gets, also too, you can play with. But yeah, I love if you've got a cave system, you got to take shelter in. I think that's great. Also, I mean, like there's even just the reality, like is it like, hey, we lead people up into these mountains, they freeze to death, and then it's way easier to steal their stuff the following spring. But now all of a sudden it's worse than we thought, and I don't know. But there's a lot of really great stuff with the bandit who leads people into the cold. Is a really good setup for a
I think I'm stealing this idea from a particularly creepy episode of the Magnus Archives, which is fine. You know, it's just like I don't mind it. Like that was like a specific guy who's doing that, and is not really interested in belongings, as it turns out. No spoilers. And as a side note, super interested in like I've never really wanted to run a Call of Cthulhu campaign, but like an investigation paranormal campaign sounds really fun. So the Magnus Archives TTRPG has definitely got my interest. I've already like pledged for the PDF.
I have a kid who loves it. I just and I actually think I think Cypher System is actually pretty good for it. But I feel like Cypher System has also become the go-to, hey, we've got an IP and we're not sure what system to use RPG, and we don't want to use D&D RPG right now. And so,
I mean, it's published by Monty Cook, so I mean,
it's an easy, like I said, there's tons of logical reasons for that. I'm not against it in any way, shape, or form. But I am curious. I'm curious to see what they do with it and how true to the Magnus Archives it ends up feeling at the table.
It'll be interesting, but that we're not actually. This is hi, welcome to the Magnus Archives fan chat. My name is Kyle, and with me today is a Monty Cook super fan, Tony. Say hello, Tony.
Hey, greetings from Monty Cook superfan land. No, 100%. I'm just, I immediately, as you said, Magnus Archives, was like, I know this is going, and I know I'm going to go ahead and share my own dumb thoughts on this. And so,
oh man, I'm just ensuring that this is the last time you ever invite me on. I'm so mad
this is the first time we're having you on. This is if I thought either of us had more room in our lives for content, I'd be like, Kyle, what's our upcoming show that we can announce at the end of this stream?
Oh my gosh. You know what the crazy thing is, that Kenny and I are starting a small podcast project for Monstrous.
I love it.
What we're doing is we're borrowing the format for this podcast called Game Things, where we just trade voicemail messages and then we string them all together and let you guys listen to that.
That's so good.
Anyway, sorry. To what we're doing,
Chaoclip says this Mad Lib style seems to work really well for eliminating the white paper syndrome while also being really flexible.
I mean, right? Like the perfect sketchbook version of this is like, you know, if you have like a sketchbook that comes and it's already kind of like unprecious to begin with, you're more likely to use it. And this is the same way, where it's just like by grouping these things by thematic categories, you're not starting from nothing. You already actually have like quite a bit of things to react to. And even if you read through the examples and you're like, that's not what I like, that's still an idea. It's just, it's a reverse idea, right?
Rolling the dice and deciding not to do that thing on a random list is just as valid of a choice as rolling the dice and deciding to do what it tells you.
Oh man, I have a Map Crow idea coming up from a really, really fun game designer I just talked to about how to use random tables to find out what doesn't belong together and do that, because it's like, if you want to find like, eight encounter ideas for the desert, you could probably think of those. You don't need a random encounter table for that. But what you never think of is like, what is that thing that doesn't belong in the desert doing there? Now that's a story.
Yeah.
Anyways, I keep trying to get back to this, and Tony keeps pulling me away.
I keep getting all the sneak peeks.
My totally neurotypical brain is usually much more on task than this. This force is controlling the mob from behind the scenes in an effort to, I think rob the corpses, the frozen corpses of the caravan. I love this. We're just going with that. Because you can just fight this guy if you really wanted to, and maybe he has like a couple of like plants out here or whatever. I don't know what's. They will lose control over the mob if. So the example we have is like the mob misses a feeding, the sacred idol is removed from the temple if the mob's artificial intelligence achieves sentience. So these are some of the examples that we have. So what would cause this robber, and maybe the robber doesn't even know that this. Oh, if he is discovered, if they discover that the robber has led them here for this, the mob will go crazy and like it will panic, and it will be like that fear of paranoia will like switch to the fear of being discovered, like the fear of being found out, the fear of judgment. Mob goes nuts if the robber is discovered. And I just cool. All right, and run amok. The mob sows fear and chaos among mortal folk by sabotaging blank. The bigger the mob is, the more devastating it is. Okay, so what is this? What is this mob trying to sabotage? So probably lots of stuff. Mob is sabotaging. You say sabotage. I say sabotage. So many Star Trek references all at once. I'm so sorry, everyone.
Never apologize for a Star Trek reference.
Mob is sabotaging. I'm going to say, heat sources, food stocks, and personal belongings. And I think this would be really interesting to kind of play around with like players' inventories a little bit. Is like to like when they go to, if it's, use their sword or something like that, use an inventory they notice they have something that doesn't belong there. They have like a brand new inventory item that has been planted on them by somebody else.
I love that.
I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Plant items on the players. Because the players would also be like kind of, like these roving rat catchers that aren't necessarily tied to anyone in the caravan. They don't have like ties to these people, so they would be just as suspicious as anyone else. Okay, so And notice here that, we have just one blank right here for what they're sabotaging, and what we're not stopping you from doing is just like coming up with whatever you want to. It's like it doesn't have to be just one thing, and if it's three things, it doesn't have to be three things. If you have one clear idea, like I said, I'm not at your table. This is just to kind of get you thinking about things. So moving on, the process starts with blank, escalating to blank, and culminating in blank. And here we have just like the last little bit right here that we have for mobs is your 3-act structure right here. We're just asking you to think about what is the progression of events. So in the case of these like example fire goblins that we came up with, let's like the process starts with piling up kindling in town, escalates to brush fires, and culminates in a city-wide conflagration. Using the classical the classical meaning of conflagration. Nicely done there, Kenny. Nicely done. So yeah, it starts with mislaying objects and supplies. This will be great because we can have a scene. I'll just write down a scene idea right here. Let's put a 1 next to this. Scene idea where there's shouting. Right. So you kind of like, you say such and such is happening. You set the scene. Maybe there's a short conversation with the caravan leader or something like that. And then suddenly there's these two groups of people shouting. I get to use, I get to do every DM's favorite thing, which is to have two NPCs talk to each other. Probably I'll just have like, one person already has like a busted lip and can't say anything. But it just like, it's the tensions are already.
I cast heal on that guy just so he can speak clearly again.
Ooh, that's good. Oh, that's good. Right. But that gives interactive things that sort of like affordances that arise from the things that are happening in the story to the objects that we're drawing attention to. Shouting and fighting about stolen goods. Okay. And that escalates to, we'll say, water being spilt on the campfire. Right, like somebody's carrying maybe like a crock of stew or some fresh water, like melted snow water or something like that, and then just like something happens in the flickering light in this cavern that they found, and that person like falls into the fire. Everything goes out, and that it's like who reaches for their torch first. That would be good, right? Because I think everybody starts with torches and ropes, right?
No, I mean, so the way y'all read the rules on that when we were playing was interesting. No, you should write down anything you want to have with you when playing Down We Go, which you could write down adventuring gear, right? And I, as a GM, would be like, how many slots of adventuring gear do you want, probably? And be like, yeah, just write that thing down when we get there if you want it to be generic, right?
Perfect. And that so I'll make sure to tell them to do that. But that'll be great because it's like, all the campfire goes out and the cavern is totally black. You hear nothing except for shouting and fighting echoing through the cavern and the whistling of wind from that cavern entrance. And that is when somebody says, "Oh, well, do I have a tinder box?" And I'll say, "Sure." And when they reach for that, that's when I'll say, "You also have."
Right. No, I think that's great. And also, like, the great thing about a caravan as a setup is also it allows you to circumvent inventory issues at default. The caravan has XYZ is a really easy answer, even if you didn't write it down in your very own pockets.
Yeah, I think this is good. Probably we need some kind of fight to happen here. um, we'll say mislaying. I'll tell you what. Let's foreshadow this. So in the process starts with mislaying objects. We'll be really specific. We'll say mislaying salted meat. That would be a bad thing to lose in this situation. And if it goes missing, it's just like, I don't know, maybe it fell off. I don't know. What are you accusing me of? Blah, blah, blah. And then the salted meat shows up because it has been used to lure some bears out from the so we can have a bear fight.
If you didn't get to it, I was gonna say what is in the cave, because what is in the cave is gonna matter for sure. But also Wolfmere says you could also add an element of shouted accusations from who knows where. Playing with the echoes of the cave and the theme you're already building, that's a really good, even a level of like mimicry potentially.
Yes,
could be very good.
I like that. Stolen meat, lures. There, it doesn't get much more low fantasy than
who stole my salted meat? Yeah, and let's fight some bears. And so,
yes, you must fight some bears in a dark cave, and false accusations from the boy, we don't even have a name for these things, but I don't think I'm going to come up with one because this isn't a published thing. I don't need to give them a name.
I mean, yet I mean, one of my favorite, like, I name things, but I do follow the trophy mindset whenever I can. I try to describe monsters and let players name monsters. I think it's good for the GM to have a name, like written down as a descriptive or to create mental handholds. But we went in very intentionally global on our bestiary for Down We Go. And so there's a lot of things there that people would read and be like, that's not a culturally relevant thing to me. I don't know what it is, other than the short description in the bestiary. So I love letting people just figure out what they want to call the thing.
Yeah, I'm just gonna call them the creeps for now, just because that's they're creeping around. That's not a thing. If this is a published adventure, I'd get into an argument with Kenny about what we call these things. Right.
Which we can do live on stream Friday when we're playing. Be like, Kenny, what would you call these things?
Okay, and then this culminates in. So this would be like the final thing. Because I think the bear fight is, I mean, listen, bear fights in real life, pretty climactic. Bear fights in a game. This needs to kind of culminate in something or other. What is the final thing that you would do to seal the deal to make sure these people never make it off this mountainside alive?
Yeah, I mean, if I was the, I mean, you could push the bear fight back a little bit, but I mean, I think for me the interesting thing is almost like, if I was this bandit / if I was the GM, having multiple caverns that you can cave in. That you basically are like, oh, the weather's getting bad, let's take shelter, and then I cave it in this year, and the next spring we all come up and we dig it out, and there are these well-preserved, mostly frozen bodies. Everything is set there. I do it. So like I pull it out. So like cavern getting sealed in, getting trapped in with these things, like it reinforces the theme of isolation. Also too, there being potentially multiple spaces within where things can get messed up. Are there survivors or something else that lingers from a previous party that potentially gets encountered? Like those are all things that in the back of my mind from what you've set up would be like, if I was on the player side, I would be on the lookout for. If I was on the GM side, I would be thinking about and planning around.
I was thinking about that. It's just like, if this has happened before, maybe there's evidence of like the previous caravan from last year, still around, and it's like, and maybe that's something that like evidence of previous caravan. victims appears supernaturally, right? So
Yeah.
like this is something like where the thief is now like this robber guy is now the victim of his own paranoia, and like evidence that he is going to be found out starts appearing, right? Like so like like the evidence from the other caravan was on a completely different mountain range, but it's here now because that's what he's afraid of.
I love
happening.
Creepers is very good given the idea of creeping chill also too, says Wolfmere. And then Bury Them in Ice came up in the chat also, and infighting and escalated arguments distracting them from the looming monsters. Yeah, I mean, if there's enough people in the caravan, you've already got other folks to fight against, right? And potentially PCs not ending up on the same lines as each other, potentially even also too, which is great for a one shot also.
I love this. So yeah, like what if there's a cave in? We might not have to do a cave in. I like that idea, but the evidence. So if there's another campfire set up amidst the previous caravan victims, right? So they hear like they like perhaps they smell the cooking of their own food from like further in the cavern, and then they see another campfire light, and they're drawn in, and they see all of these like pilfered bodies around these old wagons and empty chests and like the stones picked of their jewelry settings and all this kind of stuff, and that's where they finally see one of the creeps. At this point, it's like they're completely drawn in to the spider's web, and there's no need for these things to skid around in the darkness anymore. So
from a Down We Go mechanics level, like if I was writing, you don't need to do this for the, like, this is where I would actually one of these things, this would be where I would put in some questions in advance, right? Potentially, like there's a story about another thing that you've heard about, people getting lost in the winter. What is that story, right? I'd let a player tell me that, and then I might work some of those details in, or I might make that whole thing the story. Down We Go's first like official supplement, like the first expansion, will have unseens added also too, so I would potentially add in an unseen element of this other group, and then they would eventually arrive and find those. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could play it narratively within there, but just as a very light mechanic note, that's some of the stuff I might think about.
And I love that, because you guys have Paint the Scene, right?
I use Paint the Scene a ton, and it is written into Through the Void, and it is in the creator's kit and SRD for Down We Go now also too, because it is a lot of just asking players to provide details. And so I think in Through the Void we rework it as Speak the Stars to be a little bit more thematic, but in Down We Go I just say Paint the Scene, and that's what we do.
I love the idea of just like, once they discover this other party that has been miraculous, this other doomed party here, just like asking them like, how do you know that these corpses were robbed, right? Like it's like explain the situation, talk about what's going on, say that there's corpses, and then throw it back to them. How do you know this robbed? I think that would just be like a goosebumps moment right there. I think it's like you have to invest further, right? When you're just like, oh man, let's roll initiative, let's do this. It's just like, no, let's dwell on this feeling a little bit more.
A little bit more. And in my experience, players will also tell you how deep, dark, and grisly they want to go, and they'll hang themselves a lot of the time on their own, which is great because as a GM you don't have to feel as bad about the horrible thing that happens to them afterwards, when they're like, here's what like there's a partially a trap that didn't fully go off. Well, now you've got a non-fully gone off trap in the middle of the room, and at any moment it could trigger something, right? And so
that's great. I might actually put there like questions what traps haven't been set off. That's a good one. Maybe it'll come up, maybe it won't. But I really like that idea. And just telling them, it's just like give me the form of your destroyer kind of moment.
Yeah. And so no, that's no, like I said, it's like the one design piece in Down We Go that I'm like, this is what you should think about, is where you ask these questions, because you as the GM should decide, hey, the robbery thing happened, right? Like, so then you're letting them give shape to that rather than deciding if it did or didn't take place.
Yeah, I like that a lot. We might actually like go back and put in some questions here. But yeah, again, like this is what I love. Like, I come in here like at the very beginning, because like some of this is just like Kenny's writing is like just taking my like bizarre notes about things, like it's my bit about like they're not an ancestry nor culture, they are pieces of old gobs, lumps of dirt and shambling amalgams of broken gears. Like a lot of that is words of mine, but then he actually does the thing that turns this into a book, that turns this into a useful tool that I've already used a couple of times and will continue to use, which is the rest of this. Like the core worksheets are so good. And I just love that by the time we get to answering these final 3 questions, not only do I have a really clear idea of what is most naturally going to fit into this 3-act structure, but then it basically gives me the one shot.
Right.
By the time, it's like all I need to do now is come up with like some more detailed locations, some NPCs and stuff like that, and we're basically off to the races.
Right. And for me, like as somebody who is on record as being like, I don't like writing adventure seeds, like, or I don't know how to, like, and I read stuff about it and I think about it and I'll write stuff down and I can run an adventure. I can sit down and run an adventure real easy with nothing before I go in except for 2 or 3 notes. But that, as a designer and as a writer, I want to be able to write them. This, like, for me, the way this took shape, because you're looking at some of those key things, those themes that you want to, because it's so embedded in the creation, like, I'm like, oh, this was great, and this is really easy. And starting now, Kyle and I once a month are going to get on, and I'm just kidding.
Oh man, I would love
insane.
I would.
But just it immediately, as a GM, but also as a game designer, like immediately makes it easy to start thinking about, okay, here's where we're going to start, here's where we're going to go. And if I all of a sudden I'm like, well, I'm getting the same similar results, cool, start creating different questions along those same veins.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing, is that's why we have 10 different types of things. And honestly, like if you're just like, I really want goblins in my game, but I don't like the mobs in Monstrous, like there is probably like another core that they would work really well in.
Right.
Or if it's just like all of this stuff, there's no need for you to respect where we have placed specific monsters in these categories. It might be really, really fun to find out, like, how can a goblin also be an angel? Like, right. I think that would probably be a pretty crazy idea for an adventure.
And even what does it look like to start saying, like, what if I just take this one question from the setup of this core and move it into this core and then do the, like, how do these things start to interact with each other? And the way that you can start to kind of make a more versatile toolkit by combining as you've kind of mastered those core pieces.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny now. I'm remembering why I did Old Roads in the first place. Now, way back when I forget what was this thing called. It was the RPG Adventure Writers Workshop that runs like every fall or something like that. It's a really wonderful program. And I was doing one of these classes, and I got about halfway through about like how to write. I think it was even a Call of Cthulhu adventure that was run by one of the really cool guys that's on the Friends of Jackson Elias, whose name escapes me because I've been a bad listener and fallen behind on their podcasts. 'Cause normally I'm right there with all their names. But they're incredible guys, and it's such an incredible resource for getting you into adventure writing, and they have some for specific systems. But I realized as I was writing this, it's like, this is not how I think. Like
Right.
these and going in this method just does not work with my brain. And I realized that I would much rather draw a bunch of maps and then look at that and come up with an adventure than write down the 3-act structure for an adventure that I would then pass on to somebody else. I was like, what is the thing that honors my voice and process that doesn't exist? And that was Old Roads. And I think Monstrous is very much the same thing. It's just like, it started as a 5e book.
Yeah.
And then we were, and Kenny and I were, our heart was not in, like, we were writing an entry for the Lich, and we were like, do we reprint the Lich stat blocks from the SRD and then throw in some new spells? Like, that doesn't, neither of us were excited about that. And so we pretty quickly, like within a week or two, we're like, let's not do this, let's do this. And it started turning into, what's the tool that doesn't exist that we wish did,
Right.
that we would use at our own table. And every time I sit down to do one of these, I'm just like, oh man, if I'm the only person who ever uses this, it's still worth roping Kenny into writing this for me.
Yeah. No, I mean, like I said, and like the ethos of both Down We Go, but also in part because it's how Marcus and I run, is like that empty space, those questions, those things that we can leave open and then make intentional choices about how to fill them in. It's the same exact thing. So like I've been thrilled since the beginning, really loving getting to sit down with you and see it in action also too.
Fantastic. But yeah, I mean, it's also like, you can see, the layout that we have from Amber is just like really, really sharp. Like I've never been able to lay out something that actually looks like somebody, like it belongs in a book. Like I'm good with zine layout. I can be like a scrappy little weirdo in InDesign. I'm very happy with that ability, and I feel like it's remarkable that I know how to do anything if it's not just like clutching a pencil and dragging it across Bristol board. Like that's the thing I'm actually comfortable with. Everything else is just like, oh, this is cool too. But Amber's doing an absolutely amazing job with the layout and making this look like a real book for grown-ups. And then Sally is always in there with editorial notes and usability notes and making sure this makes sense if you haven't watched all the Dark Souls lore videos that me and Kenny watch all the time. It's like, what if we wanted human beings to read this instead of a bunch of like weird internet creeps that know all their own references?
I also still love that Sally is the one member of the Cloud Curio team that I've still never met, and we live in the same city. Like that's my favorite. That's my favorite thing about Sally, because we've never met, and so it's the only thing I have to have it be the favorite. But I look forward to it at some point not being my favorite thing about Sally.
Well, I'll tell you this for free though. Like, Sally and Kenny and I'm running a short game of Blade Runner for them, and it is Sally loves to press on the setting and just like inhabit the character and asks all these questions, just like a natural investigator. So yeah, I it's like, oh man, it makes me feel like a real dumb GM, because it's just like, I wish I would have thought of that clue, but now I'm on the back foot. But it's just like,
that is a really good clue that I thought of, that you just said. Man, Wade, good for you to get ahead of it like that.
If I was a good GM, that's what I would do, right? I would just say yes.
I'm a dummy.
But no, there's just like, I think it's just, there's something about like the analytical, editorial, writerly mindset that Sally has that actually makes them like such a omega level mutant when it comes to an investigation game. So yeah, that's pretty great.
That's awesome. I'm super excited. Cool. Did we got through all the questions?
I think, yeah. So that is all. It's just like everything for all of the different cores. It all fits on one page, and then there's a big table, like random tables to help get the juices flowing. So we have like random bric-a-brac ideas for filling in not just these little examples, but like what are the other kinds of things surrounding these themes that you might need a little help with? So yeah, it's very OSR inspired by that. Just like when in doubt, fill some pages with random tables to get people going. And that's it's like that's where my heart is. That's what brought me into tabletop RPG stuff. Is just like the art scene and the designer space in the OSR. And I know that's not necessarily what I'm always associated with it, but my artist heart is that's what I'm always thinking about. And I think it very naturally, like you can see as we were going through this, all of this just sounds like something you would run with old school essentials or Into the Odd or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I love
Cool.
it. Oh, I'm super. If you want to unshare real quick, we'll do a little outro bit. Oh, no, I wasn't ready. There we go.
Oh, I should have said.
No, I said do it, and then
I
I wasn't in the right spot because I was looking at 3 different things. If you've been with us the whole time, thank you very much. If you're watching this later, thank you very much. If you didn't tell us what your favorite monster is, we would still love to hear that in the chat or in the comment section. Please let us know.
And if you could leave a phonetic pronunciation, that would help all of us
even
out.
Better. If you could also leave a phonetic pronunciation of whatever noise they make when they scream, because Kyle or I might have to replicate that in an adventure.
That's true.
I had to replicate an animated table screaming the other day for Kyle.
Oh, that was great. Can you maybe? I know that wasn't recorded. That session wasn't recorded, but maybe you could bust that out for listeners right now.
Oh gosh, yeah, because I think I described it as there was almost a cracking noise as the scream came out, and you could tell it was the steam that had been left present in the wood erupting from 1,000 different holes, and it sounded something like
so good. Chills, goosebumps.
Whether that was accurate or not, that was as good as it was. But if you want to go check out Monstrous, the link is in the description over to the Kickstarter. It launches on
September 5th.
And
so in 2 days from today, no one's nervous. We're totally prepared.
And I did not ask at the beginning. The physical format's going to be. Tell us what the look of the book is going to be.
It is going to be an 8.5 by 11 hardback book. All versions of this it's either PDF. And there's the hardback book that has the our kind of barrow white on the cover, and then there's going to be, I think right now, the deluxe edition. I think it's a cloth bound cover with might not be a cloth. It's cloth bound, and it's got like gold leaf lettering on the outside of it,
similar to this.
Yes,
because
exactly.
It's coming from the same printer as this did. This is Herbalist Primer for anybody.
We want. I want if I had the deluxe edition on my shelf back when I was a wee lad and not allowed to play Dungeons and Dragons by my parents, I would want this to disturb them. I would want them to go like, "Where'd you get this book?" That's the vibe I want this tome, this deluxe version, to give off.
Proper wizard tome.
Yes,
I'm super excited about it. I've been excited about it since last year, and have been getting more and more excited as is. Also super glad to have you on. I know we're going to have you and Kenny back on at some point in time to talk about Agnostic. I bet you it'll be just as weird of a stream as this one was. And hopefully we get a chance to play more together. Not just this Friday, but soon. So please come back if you get a chance this Friday to join us. It won't be Monstrous Prep. It'll be Monstrous Prep being used to run a session of Down We Go with Kyle running. But also, if you have not yet, head over to rpgzine.club. This is the big thing we would love to have people check out. Sign up to get notified, not this week, but the week after, about our zine subscription program that we're launching. We'll have a different narrative game and a different adventure game coming out in 20 to 40 page zine format. The big thing about this, what it's going to let us do, is invest more intentionally in the creative partners that we work with. So we're going to source some of the best emerging and expanding RPGs designers out there and curate a selection of zines every single month for people to have just arrive at their door, to marvel at, to talk about with other people, to play. But it also lets us invest really heavily in those creators and in those designers also too. It's a way to help people, especially who cannot access crowdfunding or for whom crowdfunding would be a big obstacle, get their games into print in a more sustainable way that we as a community can get behind. So if you want to discover new creators, new games, other stuff like that, head over to rpgzine.club. Sign up to get notified when it goes live. Though we'll be shouting about it a lot over the next month also too.
It's one of the most exciting projects I've heard about in a long time. I love more voices in the space, and I love zines. I love them.
No. Did I give you a copy of the passport when we were at
I was holding it up on screen.
Oh, nobody could see it. If you want to hold it up on screen again, yeah, that's the zine passport that you can get when you sign up for membership also, which is a place to record all the cool zines you get. Or if it's not a zine, you can still put it in there. Like no one's gonna.
And what happens if I fill out this whole passport with all these cool zines I'm getting from the subscription service?
If you put 52 RPGs into that passport and then find me at an in-person event, I will put a stamp in it and I will buy you a piece of pizza live at that event, because why should you read things without getting pizza at the end? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. So
that's how it's always been done.
If you love all that stuff, head over to rpgzine.club. Check it all out. But this has been Monstrous Prep with Kyle Latino, and we'll be back on Friday to play this game.